Hi everyone, I'm Lillian.
And I'm Felipe.
And we are the Postmodern family.
We're Americans living in the UK, living a traditional life.
We make 3 new videos a week, so hit that subscribe button now.
In this video, we're going to react to CATHY NEWMAN interview of Jordan Peterson.
Jordan Peterson, you've said that men need to, quote, grow the hell up. Tell me why.
Well,
She's
because
trying
there's
to hook
nothing
him already.
uglier than an old infant.
He's like half smiling, responding.
People who don't grow up don't find the sort of meaning in their life that sustains them
I like
through
that he's
difficult
giving
times, and they are certain to
a
encounter
response that's not
difficult
emotionally
times.
charged.
And
I
they're
think she's
left
trying to
bitter,
rile him up
resentful,
with that
and without
first.
purpose, and
You said
adrift,
this
and
horrible
hostile,
thing.
and
What do you say?
resentful, and vengeful, and arrogant, and deceitful, and of no use to themselves, and of no use to anyone else, and no partner for a woman, and there's nothing in it that's good.
So you say, I mean, that sounds pretty bad. You're saying
It's
there's a
bad.
crisis of masculinity? I mean, what do you do about it?
You help people understand why it's
We're
necessary
making a
and
video.
important for them to grow up and adopt responsibility. Why that isn't a shake your finger and get your act together sort of thing. Why it's more like a delineation of the kind of destiny that makes life worth living. I've been telling young men, but it's not. I wasn't specifically aiming this message at young men to begin with. It just kind of turned out that way.
And it's mostly, you admit, it's mostly men listening. I mean,
It is.
You admit. That's horrible.
Well, it's about 80% on.
Yeah, the
Oh.
premise of the question is that
YouTube
it's
is
a
a
bad
male
thing.
domain primarily, so it's hard to tell how much of it is because YouTube
But
is
he's
male. and
responding
how
like
much of it
it's
is
not
because of what
necessarily a
I'm
bad
saying.
thing. He's like, this is
But,
just what it is.
What I've been telling young men is that there's an actual reason why they need to grow up, which is that they have something to offer. You know, that people have within them this capacity to set the world straight, and that's necessary to manifest in the world, and that also doing so is where
I just
you
love his
find the meaning
composure.
that
He's so
sustains you in
still.
life.
So what's gone wrong then?
And she's
What's
scowling.
going wrong?
All sorts of things have gone wrong.
She's
I
scowling.
think that
What kind of
I don't
question
think
is
that
that?
young men hear words of encouragement. Some of them never in their entire lives, as far as I can tell. That's what they tell me. And the fact that the words that I've been
At least she's giving him a lot of opportunity to talk.
Online, for example, have had such a
She hasn't cut
dramatic
him off that
impact as
bad.
an indication that young men are starving for this sort of message. Because, like, why in the world would they have to derive it from a lecture on YouTube? No, they're not being taught that it's important to develop yourself.
But does it bother you that your audience is predominantly
There it is.
male?
Once
Does that-
again,
isn't
this
that
is a
bit
horrible
divisive?
thing. Why
No,
aren't you
I don't think
offended
so.
by
I mean,
that? Or
it's no more divisive than the fact that YouTube is primarily male and Tumblr is
Well, that's
primarily
pretty divisive,
female.
isn't
Well,
it?
Tumblr is primarily female.
But you're just saying that's the way it is.
Well, I'm not saying
She's
anything.
like,
it's just an
anything
observation
primarily
that
female
that's
is
the way it is.
fine. She's
There's
like, why is
plenty
that
of
an
women that
issue?
are watching my lectures and coming to my talks and buying my books. It's just that the majority of them happen to be men.
Is she expecting like every facet of
what's in
life to
it
be
for the women,
50-50?
Well, what sort
Maybe.
of partner do you want?
But no,
want
because
an
she said
overgrown
the whole
child?
female thing.
Or do you want someone to contend with that's going to help you and that
So
you
you're
can
saying
rely on?
women have some sort of duty to sort of help fix the crisis of masculinity.
Well, it depends on what they want. No, I mean it's exactly how I laid it out. Like women deeply want men who are competent and powerful. And I don't mean power in the.
I wonder what she's thinking to his
in that they
answer.
can exert tyrannical control over others. That's not power. That's just corruption. Power is competence. And why in the world would you not want a competent partner? Well, I know why, actually. You can't dominate a competent partner. So
you're
if
saying
you want
women
domination...
want to dominate. Is
Oh,
that what you're
that-
saying?
No, I'd say women who have had their
Did he say
relationships
that?
impaired
So what
with-
you're saying is that women
impaired-
want to dominate
their
men?
relationships with men
Yeah.
impaired and who are afraid of such relationships will settle for a weak partner because they can dominate them. But it's a suboptimal solution.
So
Do you
he
think
is
that's what a
saying
lot of
that.
women
Good.
do?
Hang on.
I think there's a substantial minority of women who do that. And I think it's very bad for them. They're very unhappy. It's very bad for their partners.
So
although
she's
the
probably
partners
like,
get the
oh my
advantage of
gosh, I
not having
can't
to
believe
take any
that you would say
responsibility.
that.
But
Women
what
want to
gives you the
dominate
right
men.
to say that? I mean, maybe that's how women want their relationships, those women. I mean, you're making these vast generalizations.
I'm a
She's doing a
clinical
lot of
psychologist.
blinking.
Right, so you're saying you've done your research and women
Maybe
are
that's just the way
unhappy
she is,
dominating
though.
men.
I didn't say they were unhappy dominating men. I said it was a bad long-term solution.
Okay, you said it was
It's not
making
the
them
same
miserable.
thing. Yes, it is. And it depends on the time frame. I mean, there's intense pleasure in momentary domination. That's why people do it all the time. But it's no formula for a successful long-term relationship. That's reciprocal, right? Any long-term relationship is reciprocal, virtually by definition. So,
Let me put a quote to you from the
Sure.
book.
She's
Where you
like,
say
not
there are
gonna
whole
win that one. Let's
disciplines
go
in
to another one.
universities forthrightly hostile towards men. These are the areas of study dominated by the postmodern stroke neo-Marxist claim that Western culture in particular is an oppressive structure created by white men to dominate and exclude women. But then I want to put
minorities too dominate.
Okay, sure. But I want to put to you that here in the UK, for example, let's take that as an example, the gender pay gap stands at just over 9%. You've got women at the BBC recently saying that the broadcaster is illegally paying them less than men to do the same job. You've got only 7 women running the top FTSE 100 companies.
Yeah.
So it seems to a lot of women that they're still being dominated and excluded, to quote your words back to you.
It does seem that way, but multivariate analysis of the pay gap indicate that it doesn't exist.
But that's
So
just
you
not
do,
true,
you-
is it?
That's
I mean, that
absolutely
9% pay gap, that's a gap between median hourly earnings
Yeah.
between men and women.
But there's
That
multiple,
exists.
yeah, but there's multiple reasons for that. One of them is gender, but it's not the only reason. Like if you're a social scientist worth your salt, you never do a univariate analysis.
She's
Like
not
you
going
say,
to
well,
know what any
women
of this means.
in aggregate are paid less than men.
Multivariate,
Well, then we break it down by
univariate.
age.
But
we
she
break it
did
down
what she
by occupation.
does
we break
right
it down by
is she
interest.
quoted
we break it
people
down by
saying these
personality.
things. So
But you're saying
there are
basically it
people
doesn't
there
matter if
saying
women aren't
these
getting to the
things.
top, because that's what's skewing that gender pay gap, isn't it?
So
You're saying,
for
well,
her,
that's
it's
just a
just
fact
like-
of
No,
life.
it's saying
Women
it
aren't
doesn't
necessarily
matter.
going to
She
get to
said
the top.
versus he said.
No, I'm not saying it doesn't matter
I think
either.
that's what he's
You're saying
I'm
it's a
saying
fact
there are
of life.
multiple reasons for it.
Yeah, but
and they
those
aren't being
reasons,
taken
why,
into
why
account.
should women put up with those reasons? Why should
Why
women be
put up with it?
content
I'm not
not
saying
to
that
get
they
to the
should
top?
put up with it. I'm saying that the claim that the wage gap between men and women is only due to sex is wrong. And it is wrong. There's no doubt about that. The multivariate analysis have been done. So
Well,
I can give you an example.
You keep on talking about
Wait a second.
multivariate analysis.
Let me give you an
No.
example.
I'm saying that 9% pay gap
Yeah.
exists.
Yeah.
That's a gap between men and women.
She doesn't
I'm not
understand
saying
what that
why it
means.
exists, but it exists. Now,
Yeah, but
if
you
you're
have
a
to say
woman,
why
that
it
seems
exists.
pretty unfair.
You have to say why it exists.
But do you agree that it's unfair? If you're a woman,
Not necessarily.
and on average you're getting paid 9% less than a man, that's not fair, is it?
It depends on why it's happening. I can give you an example. Okay. There's a personality trait known as agreeableness. Agreeable people are compassionate and polite. And agreeable people get paid less than less agreeable people for the same job. Women are more agreeable than men.
Again, a vast generalization. Some
It's
women
not
are
a
not more
generalization.
agreeable than
Yes,
men.
that's true, but that's right. And some women get paid more than men.
So you're saying that by and large, women are too agreeable to get the pay rises they deserve.
I'm saying that that's one component.
She's just
of a
jumping the
multivariate
shark every
equation
time, just
that
jumping
predicts,
to a conclusion that she thinks will
salary.
strike him in
It
a certain
accounts for
way.
maybe 5% of the variance.
And paint
something
him in
like
a
that.
way.
So surely
we
the
need about
answer-
another
He's
20
the
we need
enemy.
about another 18 factors, one of which is gender. And there is prejudice. There's no doubt about
Seems
that.
like the agenda
but it
she
accounts
has
for a
is
much
she wants to
smaller
make it seem like
proportion
he agrees
of the
that it's
variance
great
in the pay gap
that
than
the gender
radical
pay gap
feminists
is due
claim.
to gender
Okay,
alone.
so rather
Yeah.
than denying the pay gap exists, which is what you did at the beginning of this conversation, shouldn't you say to women, rather than being agreeable and not asking for a pay rise, go and ask for a pay rise?
I-
Make yourself disagreeable with your boss.
Oh, definitely, there's that. But I
And he
also
does
didn't
that.
deny it existed. I denied it existed because of gender.
Okay,
See, because I'm very, very, very careful with my words.
so the pay gap exists, you accept that, but you're
Yes.
saying, I mean, the pay gap between men and women exists. You're saying it's not because of gender, it's because women are too agreeable to ask for pay rises. So
It's
make
one
them-
of the reasons.
That's one of the reasons.
So why not get them to ask for a pay rise?
I've
Wouldn't
done
be
that.
a fair
I've done
way
that
of
He
presenting-
does.
many times in my career.
And they
I've
just don't.
counseled. Oh, they do it all the time. You can. It's so one of the things that you do as a clinical psychologist is assertiveness training. So you might say, often you treat people for anxiety, you treat them for depression,
I wonder if she's listening to what
and
he's
you
saying, or
and,
she's
and
just
maybe
kind
the
of
next most
looking
common
for those
category
key
after that would be
words, like
assertiveness
jump to the
training.
next.
So I've had many women, extraordinarily
accusation.
competent women in
Probably
my
the
clinical
latter.
consulting practice, and we put together
Makes
strategies
interesting
Seems
TV,
that
for
way.
right?
development that involve continual pushing, competing for higher wages, and often tripled their wages within a 5-year period, teaching
you
them how to
celebrate that?
negotiate. Of course.
Celebrate that.
So
Of
do
course.
you agree that you would be happy if that pay gap was eliminated completely?
It
Because
would
that's
depend-
all the radical feminists are saying.
It would depend on how it was eradicated and how the disappearance of it was measured.
And you're
These
saying if
things
it's
you
at the
can't- you
cost
can't-
of men, that's a problem.
Oh, there's all sorts of things that it could be at the cost of. It could even be at the cost of women's own interests. So,
Because they might not be happy if they get equal pay.
no, because it might interfere with other things that are causing the pay gap that women are choosing to do.
Like having children.
Well, or choosing careers that actually happen to be paid less, which women do a lot of.
But why shouldn't women have the right to choose not to have children, or the right to choose those
He never
demanding
said that.
careers?
They
They can. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
fine.
they have the
But you're saying
right,
that
yes.
makes them unhappy, by and large.
I'm saying that no, I'm not saying that. I actually haven't said that so far.
You're
in the
saying
program.
it makes them miserable.
No,
You're
I said that
saying-
what
you're
was making
saying-
them miserable was having weak partners. That makes them miserable.
Right.
I would say that many women around
I wonder if
the
she
age of-
has
I would
partners.
say
She's
between
married or
28
not.
and 32 have a career family crisis that they have to deal with.
I don't think many
And I
people
think that's
realize
partly
this
because of the
reality.
foreshortened time frame that
20
women
to
have to
32
contend
crisis.
with. Like women have to get the major pieces of their life put together faster than men, which is also partly why men aren't under so much pressure to grow up. So because for the typical woman, she has to have her career and family in order pretty much by the time she's 35, because otherwise the options start to run out. And so that puts a tremendous amount of stress on women, especially at the end of their 20s.
I think I take issue with the idea of the typical woman, because, you know, all women are different. And that's what I want to just put another quote to you from the book.
Because there are
Saying-
differences,
In
there's
some
no
ways and
typical.
the same in others.
Okay, you say women become more vulnerable when they have children.
Oh,
And
yes.
you talked in one of your YouTube interviews about crazy harpy sisters. So
What are the
Simple
crazy
question.
harpy sisters?
is gender equality a myth in your view? Is that something that's just never going to happen?
Gender
It depends on what you
equality.
mean by
What
equality.
is that?
No,
Being
if you
treated
mean
fairly,
men and women,
getting the same opportunities.
They do. In Western civilization, they do.
fairly, we could get to a point where people were treated fairly or more fairly. I mean, people are treated pretty
not
fairly in Western culture already, but we can.
But they're
improve
really
that.
not, though, are they? I mean, otherwise, why
depends.
would there only be 7 women running FTSE 100 companies in the UK? Why would there still be a pay gap, which we've
Oh, well,
discussed
that's
at
easy.
length?
It's easy
Why
to
are
answer
women
that
at the
question.
BBC saying that
She's
they're
not gonna
getting
look.
paid illegally?
He has the
less than men
answers,
to
but
do the
she
same
just
job?
keeps
That's
throwing
not
the
fair, is it?
accusations
Go to the
back.
But
first
that's her
question. Those are
bubble.
complicated
She's just
questions.
gonna.
Seven women. Repeat that one. There's
7
only
women running the top FTSE 100 companies in the UK.
Okay. Well, the
I mean,
first
that's not
question
fair.
might be, why would you want to do that?
Why would a man want to do it? I mean,
Well,
there's
there
a lot
are
of money,
into my
it's an
trap.
interesting
There's a
job,
certain
you know?
number of men, although not that many, who are perfectly willing to sacrifice virtually all of their life to the pursuit of a high-end career. So they'll work. These are men that are very intelligent. They're usually very, very conscientious.
Uh-oh,
They're very
she's
driven.
like,
they're very
oh,
high
well,
energy.
women aren't
They're very
intelligent?
healthy, and they're willing.
So
to
what
work
you're saying is that
7
women aren't
or 8
Yeah,
hours a
we
week,
should- that's all she's
non-stop,
grabbed onto, I
specialized
think.
at one thing to get to the top.
So you're saying women are just more sensible. They don't want that because it's not a nice life.
I'm saying that's part of it, definitely. And so I work
So you
for.
don't think there are barriers in
Gosh,
their
this
way
is-
that prevent them getting to the top
Oh,
of
there are
those
some
companies?
barriers, yeah, like men, for example. I mean, to get to the top of any organization is an incredibly competitive enterprise. And the men that you're competing with are simply not going to roll over and say, please take the position.
So let me come back to my
absolute
question.
all-out warfare.
Which is what she wants.
gender
Is that what she
equality a
wants?
myth?
I don't know what you mean by the question. Men and women aren't the same, and they won't be the same. That doesn't mean they can't be treated fairly.
Is gender equality desirable?
If it
What
means
is-
equality of outcome,
He
then
keeps saying,
almost
"What is
certainly
gender
it's
equality?" She
undesirable.
keeps
That's already
asking
been
questions
demonstrated in
About-
about
Scandinavia,
gender equality.
because in
What do you mean
Scandinavia,
by that? Equality of outcome is undesirable.
well, men and women won't sort themselves into the same categories if you leave them alone to do it off their own accord. I've already seen that in Scandinavia. It's 20 to 1
So-
female nurses to male, something like that. It might not be quite that extreme, and approximately the same male engineers to female engineers. And that's a consequence of the free choice of men and women in the societies that have gone farther than any other societies to make gender equality the
So
purpose
Scandinavia
of the law.
has
Those
gone-
are ineradicable differences.
I don't know the
You can
background, but
eradicate them
Scandinavia
with
apparently has
tremendous
set up a
social
system
pressure
that
and tyranny.
tries to
But if you
implement
leave men and women to
equality
make their
Of
own choices,
opportunity.
it will
Yeah,
not
as much as any other
And what
country.
you're saying is
that anyone who believes in
That
equality,
in that
whether you call them
circumstance,
feminists
men
or
and women
whatever
have
you wanna call
segregated
them,
themselves.
should
Yes.
basically give up because it ain't going to happen.
only if they're aiming at
God.
equality of outcome.
So you're saying give people equality of opportunity, that's fine.
It's not only fine, it's eminently desirable for
Right.
everyone, for
Does
individuals
she know what
and for
equality of
society.
outcome is?
But still, women aren't going to make it. That's what you're
No,
really
yes, she
saying.
knows.
Depends on your measurement techniques. They're doing just fine in medicine. In fact, there are far more female physicians than there are male physicians. There are
Is that
lots of disciplines that are absolutely dominated by women. Many, many disciplines, and they're doing great. So
Let me put something else to you from the book. You say the introduction of the equal pay for equal work argument immediately complicates even salary comparison beyond practicality for one simple reason. Who decides what work is equal? It's not possible. So the simple question is, do you believe in equal pay?
well, I
What
made
is
the
equal
argument
pay?
there. It's like it depends on
So
who
you don't
defines
believe
it.
in equal pay?
No, I'm not saying that at all.
Because a lot of people listening to you will just say, I mean, are we going back to the dark
That's because
ages
they're actually
here?
not
We're
listening.
going
To
back
the
to the
dark
dark
ages.
I'm
ages.
hearing you basically saying women need to just accept they're never going to make it on equal terms, equal outcomes is
Which
how you
means-
defined it.
No, I
She
didn't
doesn't
say
know
that.
what
If
equal
you're watching that, I would
outcome
go,
is.
well,
Equality of
I might
outcome.
as well just go and play with my Cindy dolls
I
and give
didn't
up
say
trying
that.
at school because I'm not going to get the top job I want. Because
said
there's
that
someone
e-
sitting there saying it's not possible,
I
it's
said
not
that
desirable,
equal
it's going to make
outcomes
you
aren't
miserable.
desirable. That's what I said. It's a
Yeah,
bad
it's not
social
desirable.
goal. I didn't say
She
that
doesn't
women
know what it
shouldn't be
means.
striving for the top or anything like that, because I don't believe that for a second.
Striving for the top, but you're going to put all those hurdles in their way, as has been in their way for centuries.
hurdles?
And that's fine. You're saying that's fine.
Men are going to
I
put
think-
hurdles
I
in
really
women's
The
way. Is
patriarchal
that what you're
system
saying?
is just
that's
fine.
silly. I do. I think that's silly. I really do. I mean, look at your situation.
This
You're
is
hardly
good.
unsuccessful.
Yeah, and I have
How do
battled
you
quite
manage it?
hard to get where I've got
Exactly.
to.
Good
So that's
for you.
okay. Battling is good. This is all
It's
about the fight.
inevitable.
But you talk about men
Why
fighting.
would
Let me
you-
just put another thing to you. From
Why
you're
would
saying
you have to
real-
battle for a high quality position?
But I notice in your book you talk about real conversations between men containing, quote, an underlying threat of physicality.
Oh, there's no doubt about that.
What about real conversations between women? Is that something, or are we sort of too amenable and reasonable?
No, it's just that the domain of physical conflict is sort of off limits for you.
Well, you
It's
just said
rather
that I
unfortunate.
fought to get where I've got.
Yeah, but
What does that make me?
Well, I
a sort
don't
of proxy
imagine.
man?
Is it not
I don't
physical?
imagine that
Gosh,
you-
does she
yeah, to
not-
some degree, I suspect you're not very
Language.
agreeable.
So that's the thing. Successful women. I'm not very agreeable.
Right. I've noticed that
successful-
actually in this conversation.
At least
And
we
I'm
can
sure
go
it
for it.
served your career well.
Successful women, though, basically have to wear the trousers, in your view. They have to sort of become men to succeed, is what you're saying.
Well, if they're
I've
going
had to fight to succeed,
if they're
therefore
going to
I'm an
compete
honorary
against
man.
men, certainly masculine traits are going to be helpful. I mean, one of the things I do in my counseling practice, for example, when I'm consulting with women who are trying to advance their careers, is to teach them how to negotiate and to be able to say no and to not be easily pushed around and to be formidable. And you need to, if you're going to be successful, you need to be smart, conscientious, and tough.
Well, here's a radical idea. Why don't the bosses adopt the male bosses, shall we say, adopt some female traits so that women don't have to fight and get their sharp
What?
elbows out for the pay raise? It's just accepted if they're doing the same job, they get the same pay.
Because she wants equality of
Well,
outcome.
I would say partly because it's not so easy to determine what constitutes the same job.
But
You know,
that's
like,
because, arguably,
yeah.
there are still men dominating our industries, our society.
She wants
and
men
therefore
to be
they
more like
dictate the terms
women
for
so that
long
women
that
can
women
be
have
more
to
bosses?
battle to be
No,
like the men.
it's not true. It's not true. So, for
Where's the
example,
evidence?
well, I can give you an example very quickly. So, I work with women who work in high-powered law firms in Canada, competent and put together as anybody you would ever meet. And we were trying to figure out how to further their careers. And there was a huge debate in
I
Canadian
love that he
society
gives
at that point
examples
that
because I think it
was
helps to
basically
understand him
ran along
better.
the same lines as your argument, is that if the law firms didn't use these masculine criteria, then
And
perhaps
she's
women
letting him
would do
talk.
better.
She's not
But
talking
the
over
market
him at
sets
this
the
point.
damn game. It's like,
And the market is dominated by men.
no, it's
What
not.
about-
It's not.
Never
The
mind.
market is
Cut
dominated by
in.
women. They make 80% of the consumer decisions. That's not the case
What?
at all.
If you're talking
80%.
about people who stay at home looking after children, by and large, they are still women. So they're going out doing the shopping. But that is changing.
They make all
Anyway,
the
what I want to ask
consumer
you.
That is
what I want to
changing.
Driven by women,
Men are
not
going to be
men.
doing the shopping
Okay,
too.
and if you're a lawyer
And they
in
still
Canada,
pay more for the same sort of goods. That's been proven that men. For
What
the,
does
you
she
buy a
mean that
blue
men dominate
bicycle
the
helmet is
market?
going to cost
What is
less
that?
than a pink one. Anyway, we'll come on to that.
partly because men are less agreeable.
Bam!
Right, so they won't put up with it.
I want to ask you, is it not desirable to have some of those female traits you're talking about? I'd say that's a generalization, but you've used the words female traits. is it not desirable to have some of them at the top of business? I mean, maybe there wouldn't have
They
been
don't predict
a banking
success.
crisis.
They don't
that
predict
happened.
success in the workplace.
So
The things that
female
predict success
traits
in the
don't
workplace are
predict
intelligence and
success in the
conscientiousness.
workplace.
Agreeableness negatively predicts success in the workplace.
Which it's
So
just a
you're
trait.
saying-
You're
Agreeableness.
saying
It's not
that women
plural.
aren't
It's not traits.
intelligent enough
It's just
to
one
run
trait.
top
No, I
companies?
didn't say that at all.
You said that female traits don't predict success.
But I didn't say that
Intelligence and
intelligence wasn't. I didn't
conscientiousness
say that
do.
intelligence and conscientiousness
Well, you were saying that
weren't female
intelligence and
traits.
So
conscientiousness by
he was
implication are not
listing
female traits.
3 elements
Oh, no,
Yeah.
of
I'm
not saying
successful
that.
traits.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that
And
at all.
that the
Are women less intelligent
agreeableness
than men?
was
Yeah.
the
No,
only one
no,
that
they're not.
was predictable.
No, the data on that's pretty
was-
clear.
That was
Gender.
strongly
The average
correlated
IQ
with
for a woman
success
and the average IQ
and
for a man
gender.
associated
is
with
identical.
gender.
There is some debate about the flatness of the distribution, which is something that James Damore pointed out, for example, in his memo, but there's no difference at all in general cognitive ability. There's no difference to speak of in conscientiousness. Women are a bit more orderly than men, and men are a little bit more industrious than women. But the difference
does
isn't big.
industrious mean?
But
Okay,
that
yeah.
averages into
Plenty of men
conscientiousness.
who aren't necessarily as
Well, of
intelligent.
course.
But we'll,
These are-
we'll,
Busy,
we'll-
like able to
but
do
no,
a
no,
lot
but
at any
you
given
asked,
so
time.
why are they not
Feminine traits,
Why
let's
are they
say.
not desirable at the top of feminine traits? Why are they not desirable at the top of
It's
business?
hard to say. I'm just laying out the empirical evidence. Like we
The
know
empirical
the
evidence
traits
is
that
also
predict success.
But we also know, because companies by and large have not been dominated by women over the centuries, we have nothing to compare it to. It's an experiment.
True, and it could be the case that if companies modified their behavior and became more feminine, that they would be successful. But
You
there's
seem
no
doubtful about
evidence
that.
for it. I'm not neither doubtful nor non-doubtful. There's no
So
evidence
why
for
not
it.
give it a go, as the radical
Because the evidence
feminists would
suggests,
say?
well, it's fine. If someone wants to start a company and make it more feminine and compassionate, let's say, and caring in its overall
And
orientation
agreeable.
towards its workers and towards the marketplace, then that's a perfectly reasonable experiment to run. My point is that there is no evidence that those traits predict success in the workplace. And there's
Because
this
it's never
evidence
been
is,
tried.
well, that's not really the case. Women have been in the workplace for what, at least ever since I've been around. The representation of women in the workplace has been about 50%. So we've run the experiment for a fairly reasonable period of time, but not, certainly not for centuries.
Let me move on to another debate that's been very controversial for you.
Very controversial for you.
And this is, you got in trouble for refusing to call trans men and women by their preferred personal pronouns.
She misstating his
that's
case.
not actually true. I got in trouble because I said I would not follow the compelled speech dictates of the federal and provincial government. I actually never got in trouble for not calling anyone anything.
Right.
That didn't
You
happen.
wouldn't follow the change of law, which was designed
Not
to
once it was
outlaw
law.
discrimination.
No.
Why
Well,
should
that's
your...
what they said it was designed to do.
Okay, you cited freedom of speech in that. Why should your right to freedom of speech trump a trans person's right not to be offended?
I don't to be offended.
Right, not to
Because
be offended.
in
What
order
right
to be
is
able
that?
to think, you have to risk being offensive. I mean, look at the conversation we're having right now.
Boom!
Like you're certainly willing to risk offending me in the pursuit of truth. Why should you have the right to do that? It's been rather uncomfortable.
I'm very glad I put you on the spot.
Well,
I'm very glad that I've
but you
exercised
get my
my freedom of
point.
speech.
You get my point. It's like you're doing what you should do, which is digging a bit to see what the hell's going on.
So
And
do
that is
you-
what you should do. But
And
you're
do you
exercising
think-
your freedom of speech to certainly risk offending me. And that's fine. I think more power to you as far as I'm concerned.
So you haven't sat there and I'm just trying to work that out. I mean,
Ha, gotcha.
you have got me. I'm trying to work
about
that through in
time.
my head. Yeah, it took a while.
It did, yeah.
Took a
At
while.
least she's not upset
You
about
have
that.
voluntarily,
She took
you
that
have
really well.
voluntarily come into the studio and agreed to be questioned.
Mm-hmm.
A trans person in your class has come to your class and said they want to be called.
And that's never
she.
happened. And I would call them she.
So you would. So you've kind of changed your tune on that.
No, I said that right from the beginning. What I said at the beginning was that I was not going to cede the linguistic territory to radical leftists, regardless of whether or not it was put in law. That's what I said.
You've
And then
also-
the people who came after me said, oh, you must be transphobic and you mistreat a student in your class. It's like, I never mistreated a student in my class. I'm not transphobic, and that isn't what I said.
Well, except you've also called trans campaigners authoritarian, haven't you? I mean, isn't that
Well,
grossly
only in the
insen-
broader context of my claims that radical leftist ideologues are authoritarian,
Yes,
which
but
they are.
You're saying someone who's trying to work out their gender identity, who may well have struggled with that, had quite a
No
tough
doubt
time
have
over
struggled
the years.
with it, yeah.
You're comparing them with, Chairman Mao, who
No, just the
saw the
activists.
deaths
Just
of
the-
millions.
just-
Well,
just
the
even if the
activists.
activists,
The people
they're
pushing
trans
the
people too, they
agenda.
have a right to say these things.
Yeah, but they don't have
Isn't
a
it
right to
grossly
speak for their whole
insensitive
community.
to compare them to Chairman Mao? I could Pinochet, Augusto Pinochet. I mean, this is grossly insensitive.
I didn't compare them to Pinochet.
Well,
I did compare them to
he
Mao.
was an authoritarian.
Who's worse?
Comparing them to the left-wing totalitarians. And I do believe they are left-wing totalitarians.
Under Mao, millions of people died.
Right.
I mean, there's no comparison between Mao and a trans activist, is there?
Why not?
Because trans activists aren't killing millions of people?
The philosophy that's guiding their utterances is the same philosophy.
The consequences are...
Not yet.
You're saying that trans activists could lead to the deaths of millions of people?
No, I'm saying that the philosophy that drives their utterances is the same philosophy that already has driven us to the deaths of millions of people.
Okay, tell us how that philosophy
He doesn't have
is
time
in
to
any way comparable.
Sure, that's no problem. The first thing is that the philosophy presumes that group identity is paramount. That's the fundamental philosophy that drove the Soviet Union and Maoist China. And it's the fundamental philosophy of the left-wing activists. It's identity politics. It doesn't matter who you are as an individual. It matters who you are in terms of your group identity.
You're just saying things, though, to provoke, aren't you? I mean,
she just doesn't understand.
You're like the alt-right that you hate to be compared to. Tell us about the lobster.
Well, that's quite a segue. Well, the first chapter I have in my book is called Stand Up Straight with Your Shoulders Back. And it's an injunction to be combative, not least to further your career, let's say, but also to adopt
So he's talking to both
a
men and
stance
women.
of ready engagement with the world and to reflect that in your posture. And the reason that I write about lobsters is because there's this idea that hierarchical structures are a sociological construct of the Western patriarchy. And that is so untrue that it's almost unbelievable. And I use the lobster as an example because the lobster, we divulged from lobsters in evolutionary history about 350 million years ago, common ancestor. And lobsters exist in hierarchies and they have a nervous system attuned to the hierarchy. And that nervous system runs on serotonin, just like our nervous systems do. And the nervous system of the lobster and of the human being is so similar that antidepressants work on lobsters. And it's part of my attempt to demonstrate that the idea of hierarchy has absolutely nothing to do with sociocultural construction, which it doesn't.
Let me just get this straight. You're saying that we should organise our societies
So you're saying...
along the lines of the lobsters.
I'm saying that it's inevitable that there will be continuity in the way that animals and human beings organize their structures. It's absolutely inevitable. And there is 1/3 of a billion years of evolutionary history.
Because she's operating on the is
that's
implies
so
an
long
ought.
that a third of a billion years ago,
this
there
is,
weren't
therefore
even
we
trees.
should.
It's a long time.
But what he's
you have a
saying
mechanism
is,
in your brain that runs
it's
on
like
serotonin
this
that's similar to
because
the lobster mechanism that tracks your status. And the higher your status, the better your emotions are regulated. So as your serotonin levels increase, you feel more positive emotion and less negative emotion.
So you're saying, like the lobsters, we're hardwired as men and women to do certain things, to sort of run along tram lines, and there's nothing we can do about it.
No, I'm not saying there's nothing we can do about it, because it's like in a chess game, right? There's lots of things that you can do, although you can't break the rules of the chess game and continue to play chess. Your biological nature is somewhat like that, is it sets the rules of the game, but within those rules you have a lot of leeway. But the idea that, one thing we can do is say that hierarchical organization is a consequence of the capitalist patriarchy. It's like, that's patently absurd. It's wrong. It's not a matter of opinion. It's seriously wrong.
Aren't you just whipping people up into a state of anger and
not at all.
Divisions between men and women?
Aren't you hurting people?
Any critics of you online get absolutely lambasted by your followers.
And by me, generally.
And by me.
Sorry, your critics get lambasted by you. I mean,
If
isn't
they're
that
academics,
irresponsible?
not at all. If an academic is going to come after me and tell me that I'm not qualified and that I don't know what I'm talking about,
so you're not going to say to your followers now, quit the abuse, quit the anger?
Well, we need some substantial examples of the abuse and the anger before I could
So now she's trying to do a guilt by association.
Let's take a more general perspective on that. So I've had 25,000 letters since June, something like that, from people who told me that I've brought them back from the brink of destruction. And so I'm perfectly willing to put that up against the rather vague accusations that my followers are making the lives of people that I've targeted miserable.
Jordan Peterson, thank you.
My pleasure. Nice talking with you.
Is he lying, or is he telling the truth that he enjoyed himself?
I'm sure he did, because it was battle, and if he is an example of someone who has intelligence, conscientiousness, and disagreeableness, then he's going to enjoy the battle.
Yeah.
And,
You're right. I think he really did enjoy that.
And he won. I mean, I think any fair assessment would make him come out as a winner, because she tried to paint him in with negative brushes, and he just kind of sidestepped all of them because that's not what he was saying.
Yeah. I feel bad for her, though, because isn't it true that after this happened, she was being attacked online?
She claims that she got some threats.
Death threats, right?
And had to get security or something.
Yeah.
I don't know what came of that, whether that was true or not. But yeah, it's just, I think some people were saying that because she knew she lost that debate, the only possible route she had out of that interview is to be a victim, basically, in some way. And so...
That, like, he targeted her somehow?
Or that, who knows, but that she came out a victim out of that, and he was an aggressor. And that would then discredit the whole debate and everything.
It's funny, though, because she's there being just as disagreeable as he was, I think.
More disagreeable.
Yeah, they were really going head-to-head. And so if she did, in fact, after the interview, decide to go the victim route, that just doesn't make any sense, because
no one who saw
her female card out then.
Yeah. No one who saw the interview would believe that she was a victim.
Yeah, I mean...
But people who didn't see the interview and just have a caricatured impression of Jordan Peterson would believe that she was a victim.
That's crazy.
And so it's just, the choir will continue singing the same song on both sides, and anyone who's on the fence and saw the interview, I think, would be able to see through that.
Yeah. I think, unfortunately, I think CATHY Newman is that her name?
Yeah, CATHY Newman.
That CATHY Newman has just taken in those keywords that the leftists are pushing.
The ideologues,
yeah. About the fact for her that the fact is that there's a patriarchy, that men dominate, and that women have been victims all this time, and
it's the victimhood paradigm.
Yeah.
Which is exactly as he's saying, it's the postmodern view of the world, which is the world is made up of victimizers and victims. And
that's group identity? Is that what he's talking about?
That's right.
So that even within women, are there also other groups inside the group of women? Are there other interior groups that also have hierarchy?
I think so, because you could say that there are the women who probably would want to line up with the patriarchy and those who are fighting the patriarchy.
No, I mean like black women, white women.
Oh yeah, so this is one of the
Asian
things.
Women.
This is one of the things that is used quite effectively to discredit postmodernism. Is that how do you define the groups? Because you can't. Because as soon as you start trying to put boundaries, you realize that people cross those boundaries. So is it black, same-sex attracted, HIV positive women as one group? You have to get like very, very narrow and specific. And it just becomes
So what were the groups in Mao's circumstance?
In Mao's circumstance, it was the working man, with any Soviet style communism. It was the lower class working man,
which are the victims.
The victim of the upper class.
And therefore they must overthrow.
Correct. Violently overthrow the upper class.
And so they believe they had every right because they were victims.
Correct.
Thank you so much for watching this video. Interview by CATHY Newman of Jordan Peterson. Leave a comment below. We'd love to read your comments about this video and what you thought.
Bye.
Bye.